Welcome to Corporate Case Files, the channel where we deconstruct the giants of business to learn from their defining moments. Today, we open the file on an icon whose ghost still lingers in the memory of millions. It begins with a jingle that lives deep in our minds. A simple, optimistic tune that promised a world of wonder, a place where being a kid was the only thing that mattered. It was the theme song for a magical place, a retail giant with a backwards R that stood for a universal truth. Toys R Us was the biggest and best toy store in the world. For decades, it wasn't just a store, it was a destination, a cathedral of play that defined childhood for entire generations. And then, it was gone. How does a company that held a near monopoly on joy, that commanded 25% of the global toy market, simply vanish? This wasn't a slow decline into irrelevance. This was the spectacular collapse of an icon. The truth is, the smiling giraffe, Jeffrey, wasn't just defeated, it was hunted by a new species of predator it helped create. This is the story of how the world's greatest toy store was destroyed by a fatal partnership, crippling debt, and its failure to realize that you can't sell yesterday's magic tomorrow. The story begins not in a boardroom, but in a baby furniture store in Washington, D.C. after World War II. Its founder, a young man named Charles Lazarus, noticed a simple but profound trend. Customers who bought a crib would often ask if he sold toys. When they had a second child, they'd need another crib, but they were always looking for new toys. Lazarus realized a fundamental business truth: babies outgrow furniture, but children never outgrow the desire to play. In 1957, he pivoted. He opened a new store modeled after a supermarket, with aisles stacked high with nothing but toys. He called it Toys R Us. Lazarus's vision was revolutionary. Before him, toy shopping was a seasonal affair, confined to small mom-and-pop shops or department store basements. Lazarus created a year-round emporium of play. His strategy was simple and brutal: pile it high and sell it cheap. By buying in immense volumes directly from manufacturers, he could undercut every smaller competitor. This was the birth of the category killer, a massive, specialized big box store that enters a market and suffocates the competition through sheer scale and price. Throughout the 70s and 80s, Toys R Us expanded aggressively, becoming a suburban landmark. With Jeffrey the giraffe as its friendly mascot and that unforgettable jingle on every television, it cemented itself in the cultural zeitgeist. It wasn't just a store, it was a core childhood memory. By the early 1990s, Toys R Us was an undisputed titan. It had systematically driven thousands of independent toy stores out of business and was the single most important customer for giants like Hasbro and Mattel. But as the company sat atop its throne, the ground beneath it was beginning to shift. New challengers, who had learned from the Toys R Us playbook, were emerging. Mega retailers like Walmart and Target began expanding their toy aisles, using the same high-volume, low-price strategy. They had a key advantage: toys were not their main business. They could afford to sell popular items like Barbie dolls or G.I. Joes at a loss, just to draw parents into the store where they would then buy groceries, clothes, and electronics. Toys R Us, the category killer, was suddenly facing a new breed of killer who was willing to bleed in its category to win elsewhere. At the same time, a far more dangerous threat was quietly being born in a garage in Seattle. In 1995, Amazon.com sold its first book online. To the executives at Toys R Us, this was a novelty, not a threat. Why would parents buy a toy from a picture on a screen when they could see it, touch it, and experience the magic of a real toy store? They failed to grasp that the internet wasn't just a new store, it was a new way of life. By the end of the millennium, as e-commerce was starting to boom, Toys R Us realized it was hopelessly behind online. Its own website was clunky and unreliable. It needed a world-class digital presence, and it needed it fast. So, in the year 2000, it made a decision that would be remembered as one of the worst deals in business history. It decided to partner with its biggest future competitor. This was the fatal mistake. In August 2000, Toys R Us signed a 10-year exclusive agreement with Amazon. The deal seemed brilliant on paper. Toys R Us would become the exclusive toy and baby product merchant on Amazon, gaining access to its massive and growing customer base and its cutting-edge e-commerce technology. In return, Amazon would get a cut of the sales and an established, expert partner in the toy category. Toys R Us shut down its own e-commerce site and routed all online traffic to a co-branded Toys tab on Amazon's homepage. For a moment, it worked. Sales surged. But Charles Lazarus had built his empire on controlling his own business, and the company had just handed the keys to its digital kingdom to a rival. By outsourcing its entire online operation, Toys R Us stopped learning. It stopped developing its own e-commerce expertise, its own digital marketing, and its own online customer relationships. Worse, it was actively teaching its customers that the best place to buy toys online was Amazon.com. The deal began to sour when Amazon allowed other toy sellers to list products on its marketplace, arguing that the exclusivity deal only applied to what Amazon itself sold. Toys R Us sued, but the damage was done. When the partnership was finally dissolved in court in 2006, Toys R Us was a decade behind in the e-commerce race, with no functional website of its own and a competitor that now had 6 years of its sales data and supply chain insights. It had paid its own assassin to learn how to kill it. While the company was losing the digital war, a second, more insidious threat was gutting it from the inside. In 2005, Toys R Us was taken private in a $6.6 billion leveraged buyout by a consortium of private equity firms, including Bain Capital and KKR. A leveraged buyout is when a company is purchased using a significant amount of borrowed money, with the assets of the company being acquired used as collateral for the loans. In an instant, Toys R Us was saddled with over $5 billion in debt. From that moment on, the company's mission was no longer to be the world's best toy store, it was to generate enough cash to make massive, crippling interest payments every single year. This debt was an anchor that drowned any hope of innovation. There was no money to invest in building a modern e-commerce platform to compete with the now dominant Amazon. There was no money to remodel its aging, warehouse-like stores, which were growing dirtier and less organized. While Apple was creating beautiful, experience-driven retail spaces, Toys R Us stores felt like relics of the 1980s. The magic was gone. Prices were higher than at Walmart, and the convenience was worse than on Amazon. The company was trapped in the middle, good at nothing, and slowly bleeding out. The final years were a painful, public decline. In 2017, crippled by its debt and unable to compete, Toys R Us filed for bankruptcy. Despite efforts to restructure, the company announced in March 2018 that it would be liquidating all of its U.S. stores. The jingle fell silent. Geoffrey the giraffe was, for all intents and purposes, extinct. The spectacular collapse of a company as beloved as Toys R Us offers some of the most vital business lessons of the modern era. First, never, ever outsource a core competency of the future. By handing its e-commerce operations to Amazon, Toys R Us essentially gave its biggest rival a 10-year head start, funded by its own money and knowledge. They chose a short-term solution that led to long-term annihilation. Second, debt is a ruthless killer of innovation. The leveraged buyout may have enriched its investors, but it starved the company of the capital it desperately needed to adapt. Every dollar that could have gone to building a better website or creating a more magical in-store experience was instead funneled into servicing debt. It forced the company to play defense in a world that demanded aggressive offense. Finally, in the age of the internet, physical retail must be about experience, not just inventory. People could buy toys cheaper at Walmart or more conveniently on Amazon. The only unique advantage Toys R Us had was the potential for a magical, hands-on experience for children and parents. But by letting its stores decay into cluttered, uninspired warehouses, it gave customers no reason to make the trip. It forgot that it wasn't just selling toys, it was supposed to be selling wonder. The story of Toys R Us is a tragedy. It's a story of a pioneer outmaneuvered by its own students, of a giant shackled by debt, and of a magical place that simply forgot how to create magic. The brand has since been revived in a smaller form, but the kingdom it once ruled is gone forever. It stands as a powerful reminder that in business, as in childhood, if you don't want to grow up, and you refuse to adapt to the world around you, you don't just get left behind, you disappear. What are your favorite memories of Toys R Us? Let us know your story in the comments below. If you found this case file insightful, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the strategies and stories of the world's most interesting companies. Be sure to hit the notification bell so you never miss a case.